Donald Hatch was 55 years old, and he had not been inside this building in 4 years. 4 years of board calls, remote approvals, quarterly reports reviewed from a ranch house in San Antonio, Texas, where he had been recovering from a surgery that nearly took his leg, then a second surgery that nearly took something harder to name. For years of trusting that the machine he had built over 21 years was running the way he had designed it to run. For years of distance. And on a Tuesday morning in October, he decided the distance was over. He put on a gray flannel shirt. He pulled on a pair of dark jeans. He laced up the same brown leather boots he had been wearing since before half the people in this building were hired. He drove his 12-year-old Ford pickup from San Antonio to downtown Houston, stopped at a gas station 2 blocks from the office, bought himself a large coffee, and walked into the lobby of the building that had his name on the outside of it. He was not announced. He had not called ahead. He had told no one he was coming, not even Stan Briggs, who had been his general counsel for 16 years and who would have immediately tried to prepare something. Donald did not want something prepared. He wanted the truth. And the truth, in his experience, only showed itself when it thought no one important was looking. Before we go any further, if you found this story and you want more like it, hit that subscribe button right now, tap the notification bell so you never miss one of these, and drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you are watching from. We read every single one. Now let's get back to Donald, because what happens in the next few hours is going to make your jaw drop. The lobby of Hatch and Morris Group headquarters was exactly the way Donald remembered it, and also not at all the way he remembered it. The bones were the same, the marble floors, the high ceilings, the reception desk that stretched across the front of the space. But the energy was different. There was a looseness to it that Donald noticed immediately, the way a man who built something notices when the thing has started to drift from its foundation. There were 2 women behind the reception desk. Their name badges read Christine and Opal. They were mid-conversation when Donald walked in, something involving a phone screen that one of them was holding below the desk line where they thought no one could see it. Donald walked up to the desk and stood there for a moment before either of them fully acknowledged him. Christine looked up first. She took in the flannel shirt, the jeans, the boots, the gas station coffee cup. She took all of that in inside of 2 seconds, and the conclusion she arrived at in those 2 seconds shaped every interaction that followed. "Hi there," she said, in the tone you use with someone you have already decided is not your concern. Donald told her he was there to see Andrew Colby, the general manager. Christine's eyes moved to her screen. She typed something, or pretended to. Then she said, "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Colby?" Donald said no, but that he needed about 15 minutes with him, and it was important. Christine said, "Mr. Colby is in back-to-back meetings until at least 2 o'clock this afternoon and doesn't take walk-ins without a scheduled appointment." Donald said, "Can you let him know I'm here? Just pass the message along. My name is Donald Hatch." Christine looked at him again. The name did not register on her face the way it should have. If she had ever looked at the framed photograph in the corridor near the elevators, the one showing a younger Donald at the company's founding groundbreaking, she would have placed it. But she had not looked at that photograph with any real attention, or if she had not retained it, because the man in it looked like someone important and the man standing in front of her did not match that category. "I can leave a message for his assistant," Christine said, "but I can't guarantee when he'll get it. You're welcome to have a seat in the waiting area if you'd like to wait." Donald said, "I'll wait." He turned and walked to the cluster of leather chairs along the left wall, sat down in the one that faced the room, and picked up his coffee. That was 9:22 in the morning. What followed over the next 2.5 hours was not what Donald expected. He had expected to be ignored. He had expected that the indifference the reception desk had already shown him would simply continue in the form of silence, and that he would sit there unnoticed until either Andrew Colby's assistant came to find him or he decided to escalate things himself. What he did not expect was what actually happened, which was something considerably worse than being ignored. Christine did not pass his message to Andrew Colby's assistant. She went back to her conversation with Opal, which resumed almost immediately after Donald sat down. And within about 4 minutes, it became clear from the direction of their glances and the quality of their voices, not the words, just the register, the suppressed amusement, that the conversation had shifted to him. He did not look at them directly. He had learned a long time ago that the way to get the most accurate read on a room was to appear not to be reading it at all. He looked at his coffee cup. He looked at the door. He appeared, from the reception desk, to be entirely absorbed in his own thoughts. He was not. He was absorbing everything. At around 10 o'clock, 2 men came through the lobby from the corridor that led to the accounting department. Donald would later learn their names were Jack Dempsey, a mid-level accountant who had been with the company for 3 years, and Royce Tillman, a floor supervisor in operations. They were in their early 30s, both of them carrying the particular confidence of men who have found a comfortable level in an organization and have confused that comfort with authority. They slowed down as they passed the waiting area. Royce said something in a low voice that made Jack's face break into a grin. They kept walking toward the exit, but not before Royce glanced back over his shoulder at Donald, sitting in the leather chair with his gas station coffee, and shook his head slightly, the way you shake your head at something absurd, something that does not fit the space it is occupying. Then both men pushed through the revolving door and were gone. Donald's expression did not change. He set his coffee down on the glass table in front of him and looked at the door for a moment after it stopped spinning. By 11 o'clock, Donald was tired. He had driven 3.5 hours from San Antonio that morning, and the previous night's sleep had been thin. The leather chair was deep and the lobby was climate-controlled to a temperature that was, for someone in a flannel shirt in October, genuinely comfortable. He had not intended to fall asleep. He would tell Stan later that it simply happened the way things happen when the body decides it is finished negotiating with the mind. His head settled back against the chair, his hands loose in his lap, the gas station cup sitting on the table in front of him, and Donald Hatch, founder, majority owner, controlling shareholder of a company with over $2 billion in managed assets, fell asleep in his own lobby at 11:13 in the morning. And that was when things got significantly worse. Christine saw it first. She turned to Opal and said something quietly, and Opal looked up, and then both of them were looking at the lobby's waiting area with expressions that were not concern. They were not asking each other whether the man was all right, whether he needed something, whether someone should check on him. The expressions were amusement, pure, unfiltered, and entirely unguarded. Because as far as either of them was concerned, the man sleeping in the chair was nobody. He was a walk-in from off the street who didn't have an appointment and didn't have the look of someone who was going to cause a serious problem if he was handled carelessly. Christine reached under the desk and took out her phone. She held it up and took a picture of him, asleep, in the chair, in the lobby of his own company. She showed it to Opal. Opal's hand came up to cover her mouth, and her shoulders shook. Donald did not stir. At 11:40, Jack Dempsey and Royce Tillman came back through the revolving door from wherever they had been, takeout bags in hand, and Royce noticed Donald in the chair first and grabbed Jack's arm to stop him. He pointed. Jack looked. They stood there in the lobby of this company and pointed at a sleeping man in a waiting chair, and they laughed. Not quietly, not carefully. They laughed with their full voices at a level that would have woken a lighter sleeper, and Christine looked up from the reception desk and caught their eyes, and the three of them, four, because Opal was watching too, shared a moment that was as clear and as damning as anything Donald had witnessed in 21 years of building and running this organization. These were his employees. These were people whose salaries were drafted from accounts that existed because of decisions he had made before some of them were adults. And they were pointing and laughing at him while he slept. Donald opened his eyes at 11:58. He had no way of knowing, in that moment, what had happened while he was asleep. He would find out later. He would find out in considerable detail. But when he opened his eyes, the lobby looked unremarkable. Christine and Opal were at the desk. Jack and Royce had moved on. He sat up slowly, straightened, looked at his watch. He had been there for over 2 hours. He picked up his coffee cup, which was cold and nearly empty, stood up, and walked back to the reception desk. Christine looked up. Donald said, "Did Mr. Colby's assistant get the message?" Christine said, "I did pass it along earlier. I haven't heard back yet. These things can take time." She had not passed it along. She had not sent a single message to Andrew Colby or to his assistant. Not at 9:30 when Donald sat down, not at 10, not at 11. The message did not exist. Donald looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "All right, I'll keep waiting." He went back to the chair. He did not buy any of what Christine had just told him. He had been running organizations long enough to know the exact texture of a managed lie, the particular cadence of someone telling you what they believe you want to hear, because it is the path of least resistance. But he sat down anyway. He had learned a long time ago that the most valuable thing patients could do for you was give other people enough rope to demonstrate exactly who they were without the discomfort of being pushed. At 12:30, something happened that changed the temperature of the afternoon significantly. A young woman came through the lobby from the elevator bank, moving fast, with the purpose of someone who has a specific destination and a short timeline. Her name badge said Lucy Okafor, and Donald would later find out she was a junior analyst in strategic development who had been with the company for 8 months. She was heading for the exit, but she slowed slightly as she passed the waiting area and looked at Donald sitting in the chair. She stopped. She reversed direction, walked to the small refreshment credenza near the side wall, the one with the water dispenser and paper cups that was technically for clients and visitors, filled a cup and brought it to Donald. She said, "Sir, I noticed you've been sitting here for a while. Can I get someone to help you? Are you waiting on someone specific?" Donald took the cup of water and said, "Andrew Colby." His assistant was supposed to come down. Lucy frowned slightly. She said, "Let me check on that for you." She walked to the reception desk. Donald watched the exchange from across the lobby. He could not hear it, but he could read it. Lucy asked something. Christine responded with the same smooth efficiency she used for everything. Lucy's expression shifted in a way that communicated she was not satisfied with what she was hearing. She came back to Donald and said, "I'm not sure the message made it up. Let me reach out to his assistant directly from my extension." She pulled out her phone, made a call, spoke for about a minute, and then came back. "Mr. Colby's assistant said they never received a message about you. She's checking his calendar right now. Can I get your name to pass along?" Donald told her. Lucy passed it along. Then she looked at Donald with a slightly different expression. The name had registered, partially, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place, and then she went back to her phone. In 3 minutes, Andrew Colby's assistant called back and said Mr. Colby could step out of his current meeting for 20 minutes at 1:15. Lucy relayed this to Donald. Donald thanked her. Lucy said, "Is there anything else you need while you wait?" He said the water was fine. She nodded, said she hoped the meeting went well, and headed for the exit. Christine watched all of this from behind the desk with the expression of someone who is recalculating. Not concern, calculation. The flicker of the name registering. The fact that Colby's assistant had responded quickly. The way Lucy had cut around her to make it happen. Christine was not worried yet, but she was attentive in a different way than she had been at 9:20. Opal had stopped looking at her phone. At 1:15, a woman in a pencil skirt came down from the elevator bank and walked to the waiting area and introduced herself as Trish Alderman, Andrew Colby's executive assistant. She was polished, 50s, efficient. She said she was very sorry about the wait and that Mr. Colby was ready to see him. Donald stood, straightened his flannel shirt, picked up his coffee cup, still the same gas station cup, long empty, and followed Trish to the elevator. As the doors closed, he looked through the narrowing gap at the lobby. Christine and Opal were watching him go. Their faces were doing something complicated. Andrew Colby was 53 years old. He had been the general manager of Hatch and Morris Group for 2 years, appointed by the board while Donald was deep in recovery in San Antonio. And he was, by any measurable standard, good at the operational side of his job. The company's numbers over the past 2 years reflected that. What Andrew Colby was not good at, what Donald understood within the first 4 minutes of sitting in his office, was managing himself in a moment of genuine surprise. Donald had walked in and sat down across from Andrew's desk, and Andrew had come around to shake his hand with the practiced warmth of a man who greets everyone with the same voltage regardless of context. And then Donald had said his name, his full name, and Andrew Colby had gone through 4 recognizable phases in about 6 seconds: recognition, confusion, reconstruction, and a version of calm that was entirely performed. "Mr. Hatch," Andrew said, I wasn't aware you were in Houston." Donald said, "I know." Andrew said, "Had I known, I would have." Donald said, "I know that too." Andrew stopped, recalibrated. Donald said, "Sit down, Andrew. I have a few things I want to talk to you about, and then I'm going to need something from you this afternoon." Andrew sat. He was very still. Donald was not. Donald put his empty coffee cup on the edge of Andrew's desk, leaned back in his chair, and started talking. What happened in that office over the next 40 minutes was a conversation that Andrew Colby would not fully recover from professionally, though it took a few more days for the full weight of it to land. Donald asked him direct questions about operations, culture, front-of-house standards, and employee conduct protocols. Not aggressively, not as accusations, as questions, in the tone of a man who genuinely wants to understand the state of a thing he owns. Andrew answered as competently as he could, which in most areas was competently enough. But when Donald asked him about the lobby, specifically about the reception desk protocol, guest relations standards, and how the building handled walk-in visitors, Andrew spoke with the confidence of a man who believed that area was running well. He said the front desk staff were trained and experienced. He said the guest experience in the lobby had been standardized. He said it was one of the things he was proud of. Donald nodded slowly. He said, "I sat in that lobby for close to 4 hours this morning, Andrew. I told the front desk my name and that I was there to see you. No message was ever passed to your assistant. I know this because your assistant told me she never received one." Andrew went quiet. Donald said, "While I was down there waiting, I fell asleep in the chair. I don't know everything that happened while I was asleep, but I know enough to know that what happened in that lobby this morning was not what you just described to me." Andrew's jaw was tight. He said, "I'll address it immediately." Donald said, "You will. And here's how." He reached into his shirt pocket and unfolded a single sheet of paper that he had written on in the truck during the drive from San Antonio. He put it on the desk and slid it across. It was a list. Andrew looked at it. He read it slowly. When he looked up, he looked like a man who had just understood that the conversation he thought he was having was not the conversation that was actually happening. Donald told Andrew that he wanted a full company meeting called for 8 o'clock the following morning. Not a department heads meeting, not a manager's meeting. Every employee in the building, every remote staff member patched in. He said he would be standing at the front of that room, and he said he needed Andrew to facilitate that without telling anyone why or who the meeting was called by. Andrew said he understood. Donald said, "I need one more thing from you today. Pull the security footage from the lobby. This morning, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. I want it on a drive, and I want it before I leave this building." Andrew picked up his phone and made the call while Donald was still in the room. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment right now that says I am still here, because what is coming in that meeting room the next morning is the part of this story that people are going to be talking about. and I need to know who made it this far. The notification went out company-wide at 3 o'clock that afternoon, said only that there was a mandatory all-staff meeting at 8 a.m. the following morning and that attendance was non-negotiable for all on-site staff. The remote staff received a calendar invite with a conference link. No agenda. No subject line beyond the word mandatory. No name attached to the meeting call. By 4 o'clock, the building's internal group chats were running hot. The dominant theory was a restructuring. The second most popular theory was a merger. Someone in accounting said it was probably about the new compliance audit. Nobody came close to the truth. Christine and Opal talked about it at the desk. Opal said she'd heard these things were usually nothing. Christine agreed and said whatever it was they'd know in the morning. Jack Dempsey texted Royce Tillman that it was probably budget cuts, and Royce texted back a shrug emoji. Nobody in that building went home that night with any idea that the man in the flannel shirt with the gas station coffee was the reason the meeting existed. Nobody made the connection. Nobody looked at the photograph near the elevators. The machine ran on, loose and comfortable, completely unaware that the person who had built it had spent the day inside it watching the looseness from a leather chair in the lobby. Donald drove back to his hotel in downtown Houston that night, ordered room service, called Stan Briggs, and told him everything. Stan, who had known Donald for 16 years and had stopped being surprised by him a long time ago, listened in full silence until Donald was finished. Then he said, "Do you want legal on standby for tomorrow?" Donald said, "Not for tomorrow. Keep it ready. We'll see what we need." Stan said, "What's the play with the four of them?" Donald said, "I'm not making that decision tonight. I'm going to stand in front of that room tomorrow, and I'm going to let them understand what they did, and then I'm going to decide based on what I see in their faces." Stan said, "That's not very legally precise, Donald." Donald said, "I know. It's how I do it anyway." Stan said goodnight. Donald turned off the lamp and stared at the ceiling of his hotel room for a while. He was not angry in the way people expected him to be when he told this story later. He was something colder than angry. He was resolved. He had built this company out of $14,000 and 9 years of 18-hour days, and he had trusted it to people, and those people had pointed at him while he slept. That was not something he was going to let sit. The meeting room on the 4th floor was at capacity by 7:55 the next morning. Every seat was full. Remote staff had logged in. The energy in the room was the specific kind of anxious that happens when people have no information and are being forced to wait in the same space together. Andrew Colby was at the front of the room, visibly uncomfortable in a way that most people read as pre-meeting nerves. Trish was next to him. Christine and Opal were seated toward the middle of the room, side by side, still operating under the theory that this was a restructuring or a budget announcement. Jack Dempsey was 2 rows from the back. Royce Tillman was beside him. They were talking quietly about something unrelated to the meeting. Lucy Okafor was near the side wall with a notepad. She had a feeling, not a specific one, just the background sense that something about this meeting was different. She had not connected it to the man in the lobby, but she was paying attention in a way that the other 4 were not. At 8 o'clock, Andrew Colby stood up and said, "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. The person who called this meeting will be speaking directly, so I'll hand it over immediately." He stepped back. The door at the side of the room opened, and Donald Hatch walked in. He was wearing the same flannel shirt, the same jeans, the same worn brown boots. He walked to the front of the room at the pace of a man who is exactly where he has every right to be, and the shift in the room's atmosphere as people registered his face was not gradual. It was a wave. It hit Christine first. She had looked at him most yesterday, and recognition landed in her face like a door closing. The blood left her in a way that was visible from 3 seats away. Opal saw Christine's face before she recognized Donald herself, and then she looked at the man at the front of the room, and the recognition hit her too, and she put both of her hands flat on her thighs and sat completely still. Jack Dempsey's conversation with Royce stopped mid-sentence. Royce looked toward the front of the room and went through the same process. The photograph near the elevators finally connecting with the man at the podium, and his takeout coffee cup lowered to his knee without him looking at it. The room was quiet in a way that had a texture to it. Donald stood there for a moment and let the quiet do its work. He was in no hurry. He had waited 4 hours in the lobby. He could wait 30 seconds in the conference room. Then he said, "Good morning. My name is Donald Hatch. I started this company 21 years ago in a rented office in Plano, Texas, with $14,000 I had saved over 9 years. I am the founder and majority owner of this organization, and I have been signing every paycheck in this company for every one of those 21 years." He paused. "Yesterday morning, I walked into the lobby of this building, and I asked the front desk to let Andrew Colby know I was there. I gave them my full name. I told them it was important. I was told to sit in the waiting area and wait." He looked at Christine, not with fury, with a flat, level gaze that was worse than fury. "I waited for close to 4 hours. No message was ever sent to Andrew Colby's office. Not once in those 4 hours did anyone check on me, offer me anything, or make any genuine attempt to connect me with the person I had asked to see. I fell asleep in that chair, and I am told by the security footage I reviewed yesterday afternoon that while I was asleep, I was photographed and laughed at. The room did not make a sound. By staff members of this company. In the lobby of this building, which has my name on the outside of it." He was not raising his voice. That was the thing that made it so heavy. A raised voice gives people something to brace against. A calm voice at this volume, with this content, gives people nothing to hold on to. Christine's eyes were fixed on the surface of the table in front of her. Opal had her hands pressed together in her lap. Jack Dempsey was looking at the floor. Royce Tillman was looking at Donald with the expression of a man who has already accepted that what is coming is going to land, and there is nothing left to do but receive it. Donald said, "I want to be clear about something. I did not call this meeting to perform. I am not standing here to make an example of anyone for the entertainment of a crowd. I am standing here because what happened yesterday is not a small thing, and treating it like a small thing would be a failure of the same kind of integrity that caused it in the first place. The way this company treats the people who walk through its doors, all of them, regardless of how they look or whether they appear to have anything to offer, is the single most accurate measurement of what this company actually is. Not the portfolio numbers, not the asset valuations, not the quarterly performance. The lobby. Yesterday morning, this company failed that measurement badly. He walked them through it methodically. He described the moment at the front desk. He described the message that was never sent. He described the 2 hours he sat in the chair before falling asleep. He did not describe the laughter from memory. He told them he had reviewed the security footage and that it showed clearly what had occurred, and that the footage had been retained and reviewed by both himself and Stan Briggs. He said that the specific conduct caught on that footage would be addressed individually, not in this room, because the details of personnel matters were not conference room material. He said that the broader culture issue was very much conference room material, and he intended to address it fully. Christine made a sound that was not quite a breath and not quite a word, and Opal put her hand on Christine's forearm for a second, then took it back. Donald said, "There was one person in this building yesterday who behaved with the kind of basic human decency that I built this company intending every single person in it to demonstrate." Lucy Okafor stopped, recognized that something was wrong, and took 20 minutes to fix it without being asked and without any benefit to herself. He looked at Lucy. "I don't take that lightly. I never have." Lucy was sitting very straight and very still. She nodded once. What followed in that conference room over the next 20 minutes was Donald laying out, in clear and specific terms, what the organizational expectation was, what the gap was between that expectation and what he had observed, and what was going to change starting that day. He did not use corporate language. He did not talk about values frameworks or culture initiatives or brand pillars. He talked plainly about how people treat other people and what it costs an organization when that treatment is governed by appearances and assumptions instead of consistent standards. He talked about the difference between a company that performs well and a company that actually is what it performs to be. And he told them that he had spent 4 years away and that he understood now that the distance had created room for a drift he should have caught sooner, and that the accountability for that drift started with him and extended from there outward. When he was finished, he said, "Andrew Colby will be sending calendar invitations today for individual meetings with certain members of staff. Those meetings will happen this week. Trish has the list and will be coordinating. If your name is on that list, show up. Be honest. That's all I'm asking." Then he said, "This company is 21 years old, and it is worth something real. Not just financially. It is worth something real to the people it serves, to the people who built it, and to the people who work in it. I intend to protect that. And now you all know I'm watching." He picked up the empty gas station coffee cup that Trish had placed on the podium at his request. He had given it to her the previous afternoon specifically for this moment, held it up briefly so the room could see it, and set it back down. "I held on to this all day yesterday. Couldn't even get someone to point me toward the water." He let that sit. Then he said, "Have a good morning," and walked off the stage. The individual meetings happened across 3 days. Christine's meeting was held in a private room off the HR corridor with Donald, Andrew Colby, and Stan present via phone. Donald had the security footage time-stamped and reviewed line by line. Christine did not dispute what it showed. She was terminated. It was not done with cruelty, but it was done without negotiation. The photograph she had taken on her phone while Donald slept, which the footage showed her taking, and which Stan's legal team formally requested she delete in writing, was confirmed to have been sent to at least 2 other employees via a private messaging app before the end of the business day on Monday. That fact added a layer to the termination that made it ironclad. Opal was not terminated. Opal had been a secondary participant, present and complicit, but not the initiator, and Donald's conversation with her was direct, documented, and uncomfortable in the way that genuinely corrective conversations always are. She kept her position. She did not take another casual moment at that desk for a very long time. Jack Dempsey and Royce Tillman were placed on formal written warning with a documented review period of 90 days. Their conduct in the lobby, specifically the pointing and the audible laughter, was on the footage, time-stamped, witnessed. Both men sat in their individual meetings looking like they wished the chair would absorb them. Royce said very little. Jack tried, once, to frame what he had done as not knowing who Donald was, as if the identity of the target was the issue, and Donald stopped him mid-sentence and said, "That is exactly the wrong lesson to take from this." Jack did not try again. Both men completed their 90-day review period. Neither of them advanced in the company again while Donald was involved in any personnel decisions, which was for the remainder of his time running the organization. Lucy Okafor received a formal commendation in her personnel file and a meeting with Donald and the head of strategic development in which a path to a senior analyst position was discussed with specific timelines and benchmarks. She did not receive the promotion overnight because Donald did not believe in gestures that bypassed merit. What she received was a clear, supported, accelerated path that her conduct had demonstrated she had already earned. She was a senior analyst within 14 months. She was running her own team within 3 years. She never forgot the detail that had started everything, and for the rest of her career inside that company, she was known for a specific habit. Whenever someone was sitting in the lobby waiting, she checked on them herself, regardless of who they appeared to be. Andrew Colby kept his position as general manager, but the terms of his role were revisited comprehensively in the weeks following the meeting. Donald was back in Houston on a monthly basis after that. The 4-year distance was over. He did not micromanage. He had never been that kind of operator. But he was present in a way the building had not felt in 4 years, and the building adjusted accordingly, the way organisms adjust to changed conditions. The looseness tightened. The performance that had replaced the actual standards began to peel back, slowly, and what was underneath in most cases was solid enough to work with. In some cases it was not, and those cases were addressed as they surfaced. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if there was a moment in it that stopped you cold, drop it in the comments right now. Tell us what that moment was. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today, because this is the kind of story that changes how you walk into a room. And if you are not subscribed yet, that button is right there. Hit it, because we make stories like this every week and you do not want to miss the next one. We will see you there.